having the whole debate about transit here in central Indiana, and one of the things that's been going on is that we are losing more higher income people out into suburbia. But unfortunately, I think, though, as we are seeing the aging population, we're going to find people, unless the housing market turns around, that become prisoners in their subdivisions because eventually they're not going to be able to drive. And how are they going to be able to get back into commerce and the like? I mean, it's a catch-22 for the whole thing.
Well, so I think to that point, I think in this is where infrastructure is connected more broadly to the economy and other issues, is that you need to have healthy opportunities in suburban areas. You need to have healthy opportunities in Indianapolis area, in the urban areas. And the reason for that is then at some point when somebody wants to buy a house in a suburban area, there are people who want to buy that house for whatever reason that attracted folks that now are trapped in suburban areas, that there are reasons for them to go there, and there are opportunities for folks that don't want to live any longer in suburbia, maybe they're empty nesters now, to move back downtown. And so that's where the whole part of it becomes part of a broader discussion about the economy and opportunity, that you need to have a healthy area, a healthy metropolitan area, just so that you can have that demographic turning that works for everyone.
It takes leadership. It takes has folks that have some faith to follow that leadership, to articulate that bigger vision.
And infrastructure is almost the skeleton if the metropolitan area is the body.
And the mass transit issue kind of illuminates a lot of points. The biggest one of which is, I don't think anybody would disagree that eventually, as gasoline gets scarcer and more expensive, we won't need mass transit. And so my generation in particular is faced with this really challenging decision, which is we can pay for it now at a more reasonable cost, or we can delay that expenditure for another 10 or 20 years. Eventually it will cost more. It's kind of the Fram oil filter dilemma. You can pay me now, or you can pay me later.
Well, I mean, I can't resist the analogy of Bill Hudnut building the only spec dome in the U.S., and if he didn't have that, you wouldn't have had the Colts and you wouldn't have had the Super Bowl. So that, there are some wild gambles, and you hope it pays off, and you got to have faith in the future. But there is cost involved, and I understand people are very reluctant in this economy to commit to the cost because they don't see the immediate gratification for themselves.
Yeah, the Hoosier Dome, that was the original name, right?
Yep.
The Hoosier Dome is a kind of great example of how the world's changed in the last 30 years. Mayor Hudnut was able to say, we don't have a team, we can't really tell you what we're going to use it for, but I think it's important for the long-term future of the city to take this big swing and build a dome.
And people had some faith.
If Mayor Ballard asked for permission to build a stadium today without any knowledge if there was a team coming or not, he probably wouldn't get permission.
Building the Hoosier Dome at an area, at a time when inflation was rampant, economy was down, positioned Indianapolis to grow wildly compared to its peers, at a time when the economy took back off, making the wise investments now when there are fiscal constraints, thinking about how we can make wise investments to position ourselves to grow more quickly than our peer cities when the economy returns is going to be critically important, because they are doing that in other cities, and if we're not doing that here, then we are going to be on the bottom side of that.
That's a really important point, because if you believe the data, Indiana is in a better fiscal position than almost all of the surrounding states, which means we're in a better position to take that next big swing if we can only figure out what it is. And those are kind of fate-changing decisions where we can take an enormous leap ahead if we make the right investments.
Well, we had money in the bank. We husbanded it wisely so that got us through some of the bad times. Then you've got to be strategic, like your retirement account, and invest, buy low and sell high. So, but I'm looking down at the dome of the State House, and there's some tough decisions whether you push the red button or the green button to make a decision, and the instant reaction that people get when they do that, it's tough being a public policy leader down there. One of the problems is somebody's got to articulate the big picture. The horizon out there that we all have to look towards, because we tend to end up reacting to how does this hurt me or benefit me, and if it hurts me in some way, I'm not for it, so that I don't want to help anybody else. I mean, it's a rather narrow approach, I'm saying is that if everybody's boat can rise, we can move ahead.
Yeah, the we're all in it together thing is one of the hardest pieces of public policy. Everybody, as you say, does kind of want to say, what's in it for me? I always think about my family vacations, and there's 4 of us, and we'd be
You're
off.
still hung up on that, huh?
Well, but this is
You had a
important,
good
I think.
time?
So there'll be 4 of us, right? And that means that in almost any given day, 3 of us are going to kind of be unhappy because I might want to go golfing and somebody else might want to go for a hike.
And you have the car.
Yep. The goal is, at the end of 2 weeks, to make sure that we've all had enough fun that in the winter, when we want to think fondly back to summer, we can all say, this worked for all of us. And I think that's an important part of public policy, is that not everybody's going to win in every decision. The goal is, when you've made a policy choice, that collectively you look back a year, 2 years, 10 years later and say, this made sense for all of us. And we can buy into that vacation notion, but we have a much harder time being as unselfish when it comes to public policy as we do when we go to a vacation.
Yeah, because the media tends to have the one clip of the gotcha for the vote that's part of the overall plan.
The other challenge with thinking about how rising tides can lift all boats from a public policy perspective is that we have differing perspectives on what will rise the tides.
Yeah.
And so we all agree that if we all just buy into this public policy notion, then we'll all be better off, but we don't agree on what will actually rise the tides and make everything better. And that's what kind of clouds the issue down.
We're having the whole debate about transit here in central Indiana, and one of the things that's been going on is that we are losing more higher income people out into suburbia. But unfortunately, I think, though, as we are seeing the aging population, we're going to find people, unless the housing market turns around, that become prisoners in their subdivisions because eventually they're not going to be able to drive. And how are they going to be able to get back into commerce and the like? I mean, it's a catch-22 for the whole thing.